welcome everyone. We're going to talk briefly about test libraries and frameworks. I'm going to share a few things about it. We didn't introduce ourselves, but I hope you kind of have an idea of who we are. I am one of the developer advocates, and I'm also one of the Selenium leads. Jason is also one of the Selenium leads at the Selenium project. Uh, and the thing I wanted to cover today was, is test libraries and frameworks. But before jumping there, something I wanted to, as a thing that is good to mention, good to know that it doesn't matter the tool you're choosing, it doesn't matter the framework you're choosing. The important thing is to spend some time and think about testing the right thing. Um, the idea behind this is, for example, uh, that's an open question. Is someone here a manual tester thinking about moving to automation? If not, still this is being recorded, so might be useful for someone out there. And one of the first steps when people ask me, I want to start doing automation, is actually not writing code, but deciding what you want to automate. Because when you have manual tests scripted in whatever tool you have, the first thought is to actually start taking one by one and following the same steps and automating those tests. And it happens that sometimes a manual test you do is really, really hard to automate because maybe it has several steps that demand you to move to different websites or to do something in the back end and so on. So maybe there are tests that should stay manual because the cost and the amount of time you need to spend automating it, then it might be too high. And even if you get to that point to automate something that is really complicated to automate, well, there might be an extra issue, which is you have to maintain that automation. So the first thing, if you want to start automating, or if you are already automating, you have to think if it makes sense to automate everything or not. So when we think about what's the right thing to test, usually what we have to do is to understand our application. And when we understand our application, we start figuring out what are the main things that should be always working. The easy way to find those things is what is going to make us lose money if that things break, if that special feature breaks. So the typical example is if I don't know if the checkout breaks, then well, we didn't get any money, right? So there is a balance between how much do I need to test and how big is the risk that that test will mitigate. Sometimes to get more insights on what is important and what is not, I'm really sure that all of you have some sort of analytics on your website. It could be Microsoft Clarity or Google Analytics or possible any other tool that helps you understand how your users move through your application. And that could actually help you understand where users spend more time in your application. So as a quick example, we might have an online website that is for shopping, right? And if you think about it, you can come up with several interesting user workflows that you want to test, right? So this is an example, if you have a login, you can test for wrong passwords. If you have ads embedded in your website, then you can test if they're displayed or not. But if I want to ask you, to all of you, if you had to select the most important use cases, which ones would you choose? I'm going to give you just 15 seconds to write one of them. And I hope that somebody participates, otherwise I will feel very lonely in this presentation. Let's wait 10 more seconds. Oh, thank you for, okay, so login, yeah. So let's move to the next slide. This is my opinion, right? If I'm selling things online, I need to have the login working, I need to have the registration working, and I must have the checkout working. And obviously, if people are going to buy something, they need to see the product. And obviously, they need to be able to add items to the basket. So I could have like, I don't know, 30 use cases of like what people should go through my website, but maybe some of them are actually the really important. So this is the message for the folks who are thinking about moving to automated testing from manual testing. Like maybe choose the most important ones and start with them. Iterate slowly and make a solid base to start growing your automation. In addition, like this also applies for maybe some of you or you know someone who is in a situation that they have like 200, 300 tests and it's just a mess. It's just very hard to maintain them. They don't know where to start. They can do this exercise also. They can just realize, okay, what is really important for me to test on my website? And I can start, like activating tests that only make sense and slowly making them stable and slowly, having a solid base to actually move forward. It doesn't really matter if you're using Playwright or Selenium or Cypress or whatever. The problem is the same one. No tool is going to solve that part for you. Because the main thing here is that maintaining tests, the cost of that is much higher than creating a new test and executing them. I bet that many of you are looking for tools that help you to write tests faster, or maybe they're helping you in your automation efforts, right? There are some tools that I've been interested. If I have time, I will share one of them that I was trying earlier today that has some AI in it that could help with maintenance costs, but still creating the cost of creating a test is very low because you just write it once and then execute it. But over time, maintaining those tests, that cost is very, very high. So that's something that takes time. Yeah, it's true that creation is costly, but in the long term, maintenance overruns those costs by a large extent. So talking about frameworks, the first thing people tend to choose is the programming language. And what I like to say here is that you should pick a language that makes you collaborate. So if most of the team works with Python, then Python is a good option. If most of the team is doing JavaScript or TypeScript, then go with it. If you're moving from manual to automated testing, and you want to start learning, coding, my recommendation is to go with Python. It's one of the most friendly languages. And if you learn to code in Python, then you have many different places where you can go if you get bored from automation, from testing. You could go like to data science and even AI, like a lot of AI libraries are using Python. So that's my recommendation if you're getting started into automation. But the main thing here, the key is collaboration. So pick a language that helps you collaborate. And yeah, few things that are really important when you are writing tests. This is a team task. Design them, implement them, document how they're structured, how you can run them, how you can remove tests, and ideally do code reviews because you are working as a team. Having said that, let's jump into the topic of the presentation today. The idea is that we want to talk about testing frameworks. We want to understand them. We want to explore frameworks that are made like in-house in your own company, or maybe some frameworks that are already out there that you can just take them and use them. And we're going to discuss, browser and mobile as well. First of all, the purpose of a testing framework, in my opinion, and also some of us share the same opinion, is that it's giving you a structured environment that helps you have consistency and efficiency when you want to execute and write tests. The end goal of this is actually giving you a place where you can have simplified, that your testing is much more simplified. So you need to spend less time actually creating a tool that enables you to write tests. Instead of that, you can just jump right away to write tests. So normally, there are different opinions around here, but in general, a testing framework has a few components. One is the core library, what is actually helping you to automate whatever you want to automate. If it's API testing or browser testing or mobile testing, you have test runners, which is the thing that goes and checks your files and understands them, and based on your criteria, runs those tests in groups or randomly, or establishes dependencies and so on. There are assertion libraries, which are the things that actually help you to assert on whatever is working well or not, depending on the programming language. So you could have like Hamcrest or Chai if you're doing JavaScript. But if you're using a full-fledged framework like Cypress or Playwright, everything is already there, right? And the fourth component that I believe it's part of a framework is the plugin or an extension. So in many cases, we see plugins for reporting or to support other types of testing like BDD. Or if you have an account, obviously, that's why you're here with Sauce Labs, then you can have plugins to have a much more simple interaction with our cloud. Like, for example, if you're using WebDriver.io, then there is a plugin that enables you to connect with Sauce right away to send test data in the sense that you're marking the test as passed or failed. For example, you're actually establishing a tunnel if you're using Source Connect to test inside your network. So let's talk about browsers first. When we think about the core library for browsers, the examples of this are Selenium, for example. Selenium is what has the implementation of the library that enables you to talk to browsers. Same thing with Cypress, same thing with Playwright. Under the hood, they use libraries that enable you to talk to the browser. The test runner, same thing that we were talking a moment ago. Cypress and Playwright, they have that embedded in them. And all these tools enable you to put things in it, like to plug them to enhance the different types of functionalities that you need in your specific use case. A simple example is in Python. If you use PyTest, you run your test sequentially, but if you plug something called, I just forgot the name, I was using that a moment ago and I forgot the name, you can enable parallel execution, giving a specific number of threads. The purpose of a browser framework is to help you ensure that your website is being checked and validated across different browsers. This is enabling you to verify that everything works well. And the most popular frameworks that I know are Cypress, Playwright, and WebDriver.io. In this case, all of them based on JavaScript. I have other examples that I will show later in a moment. But I wanted to make a small parenthesis because there is this discussion about real browsers in testing. And I don't know if you have heard that. Okay, there is a comment here that I was omitting. Sorry, Michael. So Python isn't slow, Golang would be faster. In terms of browser automation, there is not a huge difference because in the end, the test is sending a command to the browser, and the browser is the bottleneck. So the more tests you have, obviously, the slower your test suite will be because you will be using browsers in a large scale. So that's why you need to run them in parallel, use something like Sauce Labs and so on. But in general, the programming language doesn't have huge impact in the speed of the test. I guess you're saying that because I think Playwright, like there was something re-implemented in Golang, I think it was TypeScript or something like that. And people were saying that now Playwright were going to be faster, but that's completely independent. Like the difference is so minimal that you don't perceive it. The actual speed comes from how the browser reacts to the different commands you're using. And in that sense, some frameworks are smarter than other ones in the way they send commands, they wait for things, and the way they do things. So for example, some frameworks are calling often when they want to look for something, and some other frameworks are actually just trying to click on something without waiting for it to be present. So it's just those are the things that make a difference, how a framework behaves more than the actual programming language. Going back to the topic of real browsers, yeah, so we have a conversation in the testing industry because we have these new frameworks like, well, they're not new anymore, but you have Playwright, you have Cypress, and they use a different type of browser. For example, in this case, real browser, with this, I mean the actual browser that your end user has in their laptop or in their mobile device. So Selenium and Test Cafe, they actually automate the real browser your end user has or your end user is using to interact with your website. So this is the direct browser they download from Google or from Mozilla or from well, if they have a Mac, it comes with the Mac and so on. But in this case, when we talk about something I like to call a fake browser, in Playwright and Cypress, they use some real browsers. For example, Playwright and Cypress, they use the real Chrome and the real Edge, but they don't use the real Safari because they cannot automate Safari yet. Playwright takes a different approach that I will show in a moment. But for example, Cypress is starting to use the same things Selenium uses under the hood to automate Firefox. And they're using the same WebKit that Playwright is using to do automation under what they call Safari, but it's not really Safari. And why do I call it a fake browser? The best explanation I have found online is from Mared, a great tester from Finland. And when we say that Cypress, or in this case, Playwright, automates Chromium or Firefox Nightly or WebKit, this doesn't really mean that they're automating the real browser your end user is actually using. In the case of Chromium, you can switch to the real browser by using Chrome or Edge by changing the parameters of your Playwright test. But when you switch to Firefox, what they're doing is taking the browser that has the open source version, they put CDP into it, they patch it, and they have a different build from the real browser your end user has to interact with your website. And they do the same thing for WebKit. They take WebKit open source, they put CDP in it, they create a new binary, and then that's the binary they use to test Safari, but it's actually WebKit modified. So there is divergence between that browser and the real Safari. Something that I wanted to clarify in that sense. Let's jump to mobile testing frameworks. We have that clear that we have frameworks that are native, so for native applications, and some other frameworks create applications that they can be used on both platforms. So the main purpose here is that they want to give you an environment that has a stable app, that you can actually use it to verify all the features you want to test in the app. And some of them have features to extract things from the device to verify the performance of the app. For example, some of them are extracting features like how much CPU is being used, how much memory is the device using when my app is running. And this is super useful because when you release a new mobile app version, you want to be sure that the app is not eating more resources from the mobile device. So, for example, you can do that with your local device if you're running devices tests locally with your real device. But if you don't have that, then you can use also what we have at Sauce Labs, that we have all those features available for you, where we can track the vitals, that's how we call it, the vitals of the devices, and we can report during the test how much CPU, how much memory was being used, how much I/O, and you can also interact with things like the network. So this brings us to the place where we are in a position where we say, okay, I can build my own framework because I can grab like Selenium from the core, or I can like take Playwright and start putting things on top, or I can take like a full-fledged framework like WebDriver.io and maybe or Cypress, and then use it maybe with small adaptations to my use case. So let's dig into that. A DI framework, so a do-it-yourself framework, it's something that basically it's like a Lego, like you start taking the pieces, you start building it, you put the things you need, you put the reporting you need, and it's super flexible because it just adapts to whatever you need, right? But you need to invest a lot of time, a lot of development. And what happens there is that while you're working on that framework, you cannot actually automate any tests because you're still working on the framework. So there is a long return of investment because, I mean, usually you need time to understand what features you want, what reporting you want, and then actually get something out of the door. And something that is off the shelf, I like to call it like that. So it's a pre-built solution. There are many open source solutions like that, but you can also like pay some vendors to do that for you. But I like to focus on the open source ones, and most of them have like pretty good community support. So this is the case of WebDriver.io. Also Playwright, you like ask questions and there are people on forums helping you. And there is like a complete package that helps you there. So you have like already assertions, you have already most of the time the possibility to automate browsers and mobile devices if you are like thinking about something like Weather.io or Selenite that I will mention in a moment, and so forth. So the advantages, the good things about one of these frameworks is that it's very easy to get something tangible pretty soon. What is the meaning of this? You just clone it, you use it a bit, and then you can already see how your test would look like in that framework. Um, there is an ecosystem usually around that framework, so you can add plugins, integrations. Like, for example, if you are, let's say you run a test, it finds a bug, you report it in Jira, and there are plugins that actually you can tell, you can make an annotation to the test and say, this is the Jira ticket. So before running the test, it goes and check in Jira and says, okay, this Jira ticket is still open, so I'm not going to run that test because the bug is not fixed. So there are integrations like that that just make your life easier. So to round up what I was mentioning a moment ago, there is a lot of flexibility when you have your own DIY framework, but then you spend a lot of time investing in it until you see actual results. And if you have an off-the-shelf framework, there is minimal setup, but there is sometimes complexity if you want to customize it to what you need as a team, as an organization. Yeah, I think I was getting ahead of the slide because this is what I was mentioning here. So to get started with the frameworks I know and I like, I wanted to mention that Selenium and Appium are great tools, but they are not frameworks because they are only used to automate either real devices or browsers. They're a core library and they need other libraries to help you do proper testing. So you need to do a lot of boilerplate to actually write a test. That's why I recommend people to avoid using Selenium, use something written on top, and the same thing for Appium. Cypress, we all know it, and Playwright as well. They support mostly web application testing. They don't support mobile yet. Maybe in the future they will do that because I see how both projects are starting to use WebDriver by DI under the hood. And in the long term, there is a chance that by DI can help them get into the mobile ecosystem as well. We have WebDriver.io. I think is the hidden gem of the WebDriver ecosystem. It has everything you need in a testing framework: plugins, BDD, visual testing, connection with Source Connect, and much more. Selenite if you're writing tests in Java, it has everything in one place, mobile and browser. So Selenium and Appium in there, and it has a bunch of plugins for reporting. It takes screenshots of failures, and the syntax is very short, very simple to understand, and it's very user-friendly, so you can get a lot of value with small investment. These two are basically the same things I was talking about, but Water is made for Ruby and Atara is made for C#. So if you are looking to do testing in those languages, these are my recommendations. But for Ruby, I have one more recommendation that I will see in a moment. And these two are also projects in the ecosystem that are being used. Nightwatch, I haven't seen so much activity in the latest 6 months, but it's still there. And Selenium Base is the Python framework that is just impressive, all the things it has. It has a record and play tool. You can just write things and has like visual testing that you can integrate with Sauce. It has different things like reporting. You can actually create tutorials. Like you can type the test to go through a website, and you can export that as a tutorial. So you can, when you run the test, you will see how it highlights every single thing that is clicking or typing or doing. So it has an impressive set of functionalities. Capybara is the one I was telling you that is made in Ruby. I think it's probably more popular than Water, and this one is actually used by Ruby on Rails to do their testing. So this could be a good option. It's very well maintained by one of the friends in the WebDriver ecosystem. And the Road framework is the keyword-driven testing framework that supports also browser and mobile testing. So you should have a look at it if you want to have tests that are easy to read, easy to understand, and you don't need actually to write a lot of code. So this could be also a good starting point for folks who are moving from manual to automated testing. To start wrapping up, the two frameworks that are not open source, well, Espresso is open source, but try to contribute to it and get into the Google ecosystem and all that. So XUI Test and Espresso, they are made for native applications in iOS and Android. The thing is that they're pretty good because they're integrated into the whole development cycle of the application. So they're integrated into all the tooling around there. The cool thing is that it's just very simple to write a test there because you have all elements at hand. You don't need to inspect things and so on. The only downside I see, and I don't know if they're going to change something in the future, is if your native application at some point has a web view and you need to test that web view for some reason, these frameworks will not help you. So you will probably end up in a combination with maybe 80% of your tests are written in XUI Test or Espresso, and then the rest, if you have to test that web view, you will probably end up writing that in WebDriver.io or in whatever framework that uses Appium under the hood that lets you actually test web views in a proper way. So frameworks are essential. They give you the structure, the consistency, and the efficiency because they let you focus on writing tests. And my recommendation is that you try to find a framework that is ready, it's off the shelf for you, and it enables you to get focused on writing tests. It's very much likely that if you find a framework that you like, you will need to do some customization to it, but normally this is not something that demands a lot of resources. So you will get more value when you use a well-maintained framework from the open source ecosystem because you also have the community backing it up. Some key takeaways for you as a SOSAPS customer is that we understand how these frameworks work. So when you have any issues, you can contact us in the customer support area, and we will help you. And most of it, these frameworks are integrated into the whole set of ecosystem and workflows that we have at SOS. One of the cool things is that these frameworks have plugins, or they have different features that let you as a customer send data to SOS in the sense of, what version they're using, mark the test as passed or failed, let let SOS Labs know different characteristics of your test. And this is extremely valuable because when you get the option to see the new dashboard that gives you the whole overview of your tests, the data, the information you will get from it will be much more interesting for you if you actually start sending or continue sending this data to SOS. So with that, I wanted to stop here and have an open Q&A. We can talk about anything you folks want. And